Now, I want to talk about big tech and how companies like Apple are threatening free speech in the West and sucking up to dictators everywhere else in a minute. But first, we all know that relations between Barack Obama and Joe Biden have never been, well, shall we say, warm and fuzzy. The story of Obama saying about the man who would become president, quote, "Don't underestimate Joe's ability to you-know-what things up," is legendary. And now it looks like the former president has done it again, throwing shade on Joe Biden at a Raphael Warnock rally for this week's Senate runoff elections in Georgia. Have a look.
We all know some folks in our lives who we don't wish them ill will. They say crazy stuff. We're all like, well, you know, Uncle Joe, you know what happened to him. You know, it's okay. They're part of the family. But you don't give them serious responsibilities.
Serious responsibilities, like, you know, President of the United States. Anyway, Barak, I'm sure that was just a coincidence there, and, well, you know, I believe you, millions wouldn't. But now, can we talk about big tech? No, not Twitter, which we've spoken about before and which has now been revealed to be a cesspit of censorship for so-called progressives who find even the Babylon Bee triggering, but rather Apple. Because while the left freaks out because Elon Musk is clearing pedophiles off Twitter and letting the Babylon Bee tweet again, they are also showing themselves to be up as real hypocrites. Because if they really cared about these things, the left used to care about, you know, women's rights, freedom to protest, freedom of speech, that sort of thing, they would have forgotten about Twitter and instead turned their sights on Apple. Once upon a time, Apple marketed itself as the company that would stand up to Big Brother, as this ad from 1984 reveals.
With one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
Well, nowadays, of course, that ad wouldn't work. Not only because the left now sees George Orwell's seminal work about totalitarianism, 1984, as not so much a warning manual, but an instruction manual, but also because Apple is on the side of the totalitarians now. Specifically, the Chinese Communist Party, who govern the prison state where Apple, guess what, makes its iPhones. Recent protests about conditions and code policies at Apple's Foxconn factory have cost the company millions and been terrible for business. And they have also spread all over China. And I say, by the way, good luck to the protesters. But Apple's attitude, of course, has been a little bit different. Instead of standing up for freedom, they issued a software update so that phones in China couldn't use their AirDrop facility for more than 10 minutes at a time. The AirDrop function on the iPhone being a way that protesters would anonymously connect and share information. So much for smashing Big Brother like in that ad, hey? And Apple CEO Tim Cook wasn't that happy about being asked why they did this by a Fox News reporter on Friday.
Do you support the Chinese people's right to protest? Do you regret restricting AirDrop access that protesters used to evade surveillance from the Chinese government? Do you think it's problematic to do business with the Communist Chinese Party when they suppress human rights?
This, by the way, isn't the first time that Apple has sided with the CCP. Back in 2019, during the Hong Kong protests, Apple also followed China's direction to remove an app that had been used by demonstrators to coordinate their actions and track where the police were. Of course, it's not just in China that Apple wants to curtail free speech. Now that Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, Apple reportedly threatened to block the social media giant off its App Store, vastly limiting its reach. This earned a swift, stern rebuke from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, speaking to Tucker Carlson earlier this week.
This is maybe the most powerful company in the entire world, certainly one of the most powerful companies in American history. They exercise more authority in some respects than even some governments do, and they're using their authority to protect the CCP, while also try to limit speech here in the United States. They get a lot of benefits from the government, as you said, patent things like that. The social media companies get liability protection, and yet they turn around and they use that protection to marginalize voices they disagree with. So I think from the congressional perspective, though, they need to look at antitrust with these massive companies because they are exercising massive amounts of power over our society.
And Ron DeSantis was speaking there before we learned all the details from Elon Musk about how Twitter worked to step on the Hunter Biden laptop story and interfere with the 2020 election. The great problem all of us have, of course, is that big tech is now so ingrained in all of our lives, and yet they compromise everything they touch, practicing a sort of autocrat's capitalism that should upend yours and my natural sympathy to companies over the government, because corporations like Apple have given China yet another lever over America and the West, compromising our values and reversing the promise that doing business with Beijing would mean Beijing would become more liberal. The opposite has happened, and it is well past time for us to do something about it.